The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, episode 30, Lighting the Hearth. Claiming the new as home, welcome back to the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, where we strip away the layers, sit with the raw stuff, and explore the spaces most people step around. Today, we close this arc with a focus on something deeper than survival or rebuilding, what it means to truly inhabit the life you've created. Rebuilding is one thing, but claiming it as home is another. A hearth isn't just a fire. It's a center of belonging, a source of warmth that feeds both you and those you choose to welcome in. This episode is about grounding into what you've built, not as a temporary shelter, but as a place that sustains you for the long journey ahead. We'll explore the balance between keeping your fire strong and letting its light spill into the world, between private safety and shared warmth. You'll hear personal reflection, grounded psychological insight, and practical strategies for tending your hearth while allowing it to be a place of connection, not just protection. And because the real end of the journey isn't the finish line, it's the moment you realize you've stopped building for survival and started building for living. So let's begin. From shelter to sanctuary, there's a difference between having a roof over your head and feeling at home. A structure can keep you safe, protect you from the weather, and meet your basic needs. But home is something deeper. It's where you exhale without thinking. It's where you can be fully yourself without monitoring every word or gesture. After a long period of survival, rebuilding, or recovery, stepping into that feeling can be surprisingly difficult. The walls you've built to protect yourself may still be standing. The rooms you've carefully constructed might feel empty because you've been focused on building rather than living. Claiming the new as home is about more than completing a project. It's about allowing your nervous system to recognize safety, your heart to trust the space, and your spirit to expand into it. It's about creating a place, internally and externally, that not only shelters you, but sustains you for the long journey ahead. Themes and attributes, embodiment, fully inhabiting the space you've created, emotional belonging, letting your environment mirror who you are now. Integration, blending your past, present, and hopes for the future into a living whole. Sustainability, designing life in a way that nourishes rather than drains. The hearth and the first fire, imagine you've built a small cabin deep in the woods. It's been a long process, clearing the ground, laying the foundation, raising the walls. You've checked the structure over and over, making sure it's sturdy enough to withstand storms. But when the building is finally complete, you realize you've been living in it like a guest. You move from room to room without touching the walls. You sleep in the bed, but you haven't unpacked your belongings. It's safe, but it's not yet yours. One evening, you decide to light the hearth for the first time. The act feels ceremonial. As the fire catches, warmth fills the cabin in a way that no insulation or thick blanket ever could. The light flickers on the walls, turning the space from functional to alive. That's the shift we're talking about. The moment when you stop simply surviving in your rebuilt life and start claiming it as your own. It doesn't happen automatically when the work is done. Sometimes you have to deliberately kindle that first fire, invite warmth in, permit yourself to feel rooted, and acknowledge that this place, this life, belongs to you now. Personal reflection. There have been times when I've reached a stage in life where everything looks stable from the outside, routines in place, commitments fulfilled, spaces organized, yet inside, I still felt like I was borrowing my own life. One of the clearest examples was after moving into a new flat following a long period of instability. The move had been necessary and hard-won, but for weeks I treated the place as though I was just passing through. I unpacked the essentials but left most of my belongings in boxes. I kept the walls bare, telling myself I'd get around to it eventually. I realized later that this wasn't laziness, it was hesitation. Part of me didn't want to get too comfortable in case something went wrong again. It was a form of emotional self-protection. If I didn't fully claim the space, I thought it might hurt less if I had to leave. The turning point came on a rainy Sunday. Sat on the floor surrounded by the boxes I'd been avoiding. I started hanging artwork, placing books on shelves, and bringing out objects that carried good memories. By the end of the day, the flat felt different, it felt alive. That moment taught me that home, isn't just a physical space. It's a choice we make to root ourselves in the present, even with the uncertainty of the future. When I finally gave myself permission to inhabit the space, my nervous system seemed to soften. I slept better, I moved more freely. I started inviting people over. It was like lighting my hearth for the first time. Psychological insight. What I experienced was closely tied to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow, 1943, particularly the transition from safety needs to belongingness and love needs. When we're rebuilding after a difficult chapter, our initial focus is on stability, securing the roof, the income, the daily structure. But true well-being comes from moving beyond safety into genuine connection and belonging. Another key element here is territoriality theory, Altman, 1975, which suggests that claiming a space as one's own, both physically and symbolically, contributes to identity and emotional security. Personalizing a space, even with small rituals like lighting a candle or displaying meaningful objects, signals to the brain that we are safe enough to invest emotionally. For me, the delay in claiming my space came from anticipatory loss, the protective habit of keeping emotional distance to minimize future disappointment. This is a common response for people who've faced instability or repeated disruption. It's similar to learned helplessness, Seligman, 1972, where past experiences of powerlessness influence present behavior, even when circumstances have changed. By consciously engaging with my environment, unpacking, decorating, and hosting, I was sending my nervous system a new message. This is safe, you belong here. Over time, this created not only comfort, but also a foundation for deeper joy and connection. Insight prompts. Where in your life are you still living like a guest in your own space or circumstances? What small acts could help you claim it more fully as your own? Theory in action: choose one room, corner, or area of your life that feels functional but not alive. Spend an hour adding warmth or personal meaning, rearrange furniture, add a photograph, light a candle, or bring in something that makes you smile. Notice how the space feels afterwards, and whether your own posture or breathing changes in response. The slow burn of belonging isn't a single moment of arrival. It's a slow burn, a steady warmth that grows over time. When you're rebuilding your life, there's often a temptation to rush into declaring a new chapter home, just to relieve the discomfort of uncertainty. But real belonging doesn't come from rushing to fill the space. It comes from living in it, breathing in it, and letting your presence saturate it. It's about noticing the small rituals that begin to root you and the subtle shifts in how you feel when you're truly settled. Themes and attributes. Patience, letting a sense of home emerge at its own pace. Ritual, creating daily or seasonal practices that anchor you. Embodiment, feeling fully present in the space you occupy. Integration, allowing your values and environment to align naturally. From an empty room, I remember once moving into a flat that felt nothing like mine. The walls were bare, the echoes too sharp, and the air carried the faint scent of someone else's life. I unpacked quickly, thinking that filling shelves and hanging pictures would make the place feel like home. But weeks later, I still felt like a guest in my own space. It wasn't until the small, ordinary acts began to accumulate that something shifted. Lighting a candle in the evening, leaving my favorite book on the arm of the sofa, learning how the light moved across the floor at different hours of the day. I stopped trying to force the feeling and started letting the space show me how it wanted to be lived in. This is the slow burn of belonging. It's not the grand gestures, the perfectly decorated room, the expensive furniture that make the difference. It's the cup of tea made the same way every morning. It's the blanket draped over the same chair because that's where you naturally sit. It's the quiet knowing that you can exhale here. A hearth, in the truest sense, isn't lit once and left to burn. It's tended daily with care and attentiveness. And just like tending a fire, belonging requires steady presence, small adjustments, and the willingness to sit with the slow warmth rather than demanding instant heat. Personal reflection. I've had moments where I've rushed to declaring something as home, simply because I wanted the discomfort of transition to be over. After moving, starting new projects, or even after ending relationships, I'd throw myself into arranging, fixing, or building routines, all in the hope that I could fast forward to the part where I felt secure. One of the clearest examples was after I'd left a particularly draining chapter of my life. I found a new place and immediately set about making it mine. I bought new cushions, rearranged the furniture twice, and even picked out a color scheme I thought would make me feel rooted. But despite my best efforts, there was a persistent emptiness, the sense that I was still waiting for something to click. What I eventually realized was that I was trying to shortcut a process that can't be rushed. The real feeling of home came not from the aesthetics, but from the lived experience. It came from the evenings I spent writing at the kitchen table, from cooking my favorite meals, from the first time I had a close friend over and felt completely at ease. That experience taught me that belonging isn't a switch you flip. It's a relationship you cultivate with your environment and with yourself. And like any good relationship, it needs time, patience, and genuine presence to deepen. Psychological insight. This slow-forming sense of belonging aligns with John Bowlby's attachment theory, particularly the concept of a secure base, a space or relationship from which we can explore the world and return to for safety and grounding. Just as secure attachments in childhood take time and repeated positive interactions to form, so too does our attachment to a new life stage or environment. Research into environmental psychology supports this, showing that feelings of home are built through repeated, meaningful interactions with a space rather than through immediate occupation or ownership. Manzo, 2003. This is why people often feel more connected to a modest, well-lived-in home than to a perfectly designed but impersonal one. In my own experience, I've noticed how my nervous system needs to recognize a space as safe before it will allow me to truly settle. That's not something you can fake with decor or plans. It's something that builds over time as your body learns that this place is predictable, supportive, and nourishing. Understanding this has shifted my approach. Instead of pushing for instant belonging, I focus on ritual and consistency, small repeatable acts that signal to my mind and body, this is where we are now, this is safe. Over time, those rituals weave a kind of invisible fabric around me, creating the warmth of a hearth that can't be rushed. Insight prompts. Where in your life right now are you trying to rush the feeling of belonging? What small, repeatable rituals could help you feel more at home in your current environment? Theory in action. Choose one simple ritual, making tea, lighting a candle, journaling, or playing a specific song, and commit to doing it in the same place every day for 2 weeks. At the end of that period, notice if that spot feels more familiar, more yours. Keep building from there, letting the feeling of home emerge naturally through repetition and care. Protecting the flame. When we think of a hearth, we often picture the fire itself, bright, warm, welcoming. But what we sometimes forget is how easily that flame can be smothered or burn out if left untended. Protecting the flame is about maintaining the energy, connection, and sense of safety you've worked so hard to create in your rebuilt life. This isn't about guarding it so fiercely that no one can enjoy it with you. It's about ensuring that what sustains you isn't drained by neglect, overextension, or letting the wrong energy too close. Themes and attributes. Sustainability. Ensuring your energy isn't consumed faster than it's replenished. Discernment. Choosing who and what you let near your fire. Consistency. Maintaining the routines and practices that keep you grounded. Self-respect. Refusing to apologize for protecting what keeps you well. A fire that needed guarding. There were times I'd let my attention drift, get caught up in a book or conversation, only to realize the flame was dying. Then I'd be scrambling to revive it, frustrated with myself for forgetting something so vital. It struck me how much that mirrored my emotional energy. When I ignored the practices and boundaries that kept me balanced, I'd find myself burned out, resentful, or depleted, not because others had taken too much, but because I hadn't been guarding the flame. In life, protecting the flame doesn't mean hoarding it or keeping it hidden. It means knowing its needs, the oxygen of solitude, the fuel of joy, the steadying presence of people who add warmth rather than take it away. It means recognizing when the fire is dimming and acting before it's gone cold. Personal reflection. There have been periods in my life where I've let my flame dwindle without realizing it. One example was during a time when I was juggling too many commitments, work, personal projects, relationships, and the constant drive to keep up. On paper, it looked like I was thriving. Inside, I was quietly running on fumes. I remember saying yes to too many invitations, taking calls when I needed rest, and trying to be available to everyone all the time. At first, I told myself this was generosity, that being open and responsive was part of who I was. But the truth was, I was eroding the very foundation of my well-being. The breaking point came when I realized I was no longer enjoying the things that once brought me joy. Activities that used to fuel me felt like obligations, and I dread them rather than look forward to them. That was my signal that the fire had been left unattended for too long. Since then, I've learned that protecting my flame requires both discipline and honesty. I have to be willing to say no, to step back, and to recognize that being less available to others often makes me more present when I am with them. I've also learned to check in with myself regularly, to notice the difference between a fire that's burning bright and one that's slowly fading. Psychological insight. The idea of protecting the flame closely relates to the concept of emotional energy management, a framework often discussed in conservation of resources theory, Hobful, 1989. This theory suggests that we each have a finite set of resources, time, energy, and emotional bandwidth, and stress occurs when these are depleted faster than they can be replenished. What I experienced during my burnout phase was exactly that. My output far exceeded my input. Without conscious boundaries, I was allowing small drains on my energy to accumulate until they left me running on empty. This also ties into polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges, which explains how our nervous system constantly scans for safety and threat. When our reserves are low, even small stresses can trigger a defensive response, making it harder to stay connected and grounded. Protecting the flame isn't just about rest. It's about maintaining a nervous system that can stay regulated, allowing for both connection and resilience. For me, reframing boundaries as a way to tend my internal hearth shifted everything. I stopped seeing them as walls and started seeing them as the frame around a fire, something that shapes, protects, and sustains the warmth without blocking its light. Insight prompts. What are the key practices that keep your inner flame burning? Who or what consistently adds warmth to your life, and who or what tends to drain it? Theory in action. For 1 week, track your energy like you would track expenses. Each evening, make 2 lists. 1. Actions, people, or experiences that added warmth and fuel to your fire. 2. Actions, people, or experiences that were taken from it. At the end of the week, review your lists. Ask yourself, what can I do to increase the fuel sources and reduce the drains? Which boundaries need tightening to protect the flame long term? Inviting others to the hearth may be personal, but it's also communal. Part of its magic is how it becomes a gathering place, somewhere people come together to share stories, meals, warmth, and presence. Inviting others to the hearth is an act of trust because it means letting them into a space that sustains you. It requires balancing generosity with discernment, making sure you welcome those who respect the fire rather than those who risk snuffing it out. Themes and attributes. Openness, allowing others to witness and share in what you've built. Mutual respect, ensuring those invited understand and honor the space. Collective trust, choosing people who can meet you where you are now. Shared presence, creating moments that deepen connection rather than deplete it. Who you let sit by the fire. When I think about my heart, I imagine a small circle of chairs pulled close to the glow. Not everyone gets a seat there. Over the years, I've learned that letting the wrong person into that space can be like tossing wet wood on the fire. It fills the air with smoke, makes it harder to breathe, and weakens the warmth. But the right people, they're the ones who come prepared to contribute. They might bring a log, a story, a meal, or simply their undivided attention. They leave the space richer than they found it. These are the guests who understand the unspoken rules that the fire belongs to everyone in the circle, and keeping it alive is a shared responsibility. A true hearth, whether physical or symbolic, is more than just a source of heat. It's the center of a home, the place where belonging is made tangible. To let someone sit there is to say, I trust you with the heart of my life. That trust is not handed out lightly, because the hearth is where both the most sacred warmth and the most fragile embers live. Personal reflection. I've had both kinds of experiences, welcoming people who nourished my hearth and those who drained it. One particularly memorable time was when I began reconnecting socially after a long period of withdrawal. I invited a small group of people over, thinking it would be a warm, easy evening, and for the most part it was. But there was one person who dominated the conversation, dismissed boundaries, and made subtle digs that left the atmosphere heavy. It took me a while to realize that even in my own home, I was letting someone else set the tone. I didn't intervene because I didn't want to make things awkward, but the truth is, the discomfort was already there. The rest of the evening, I found myself distracted, tending more to the tension than to the people who had come in good faith. That night reminded me of something essential. The hearth is mine to tend. If I don't protect it, no one else will. Since then, I've been more deliberate about who I invite in, not from a place of exclusion, but from a commitment to preserving the warmth for everyone who sits there. Psychological insight. The process of inviting others to the hearth can be understood through boundary theory, Ashforth et al. 2000, which explores how individuals manage the interface between different areas of their lives. In this case, the hearth represents a core personal space, a physical, emotional, and psychological environment where you feel secure and replenished. Letting others into that space requires careful boundary permeability, deciding how much of the private self is shared with the outside world. Too much permeability, and you risk emotional overexposure or intrusion. Too little, and you miss out on the benefits of connection and shared joy. It's also worth noting the role of emotional contagion. Hatfield, Cacioppo, and Rapson, 1994. The tendency for emotions to spread between people. When you invite someone into your hearth space, you're allowing their energy to influence the collective mood. This is why selective trust matters. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting the entire emotional atmosphere of the gathering. Over time, I've found that making these decisions intentionally has strengthened both my boundaries and my relationships. When I invite someone in, I can be fully present, knowing that their presence is adding to the warmth rather than dimming it. Insight prompts. Who currently has a seat at your hearth and why? How do you decide who to welcome in and who to keep at a respectful distance? Theory in action. Before your next gathering, whether it's at home, in a public space, or even a one-on-one meeting, take a moment to visualize your hearth. Ask yourself, what kind of energy do I want present here? Who will naturally contribute to that warmth, and who might challenge it? Make at least one conscious choice to protect the atmosphere, whether that's adjusting the guest list, setting clearer boundaries, or preparing a grounding ritual for yourself before they arrive. Tending the fire through the seasons, a hearth isn't just lit once, it needs ongoing care to stay alive. Whether physical or symbolic, the fire you've built in your life will go through cycles of intensity and rest. There will be seasons where the flames are bright and the warmth reaches far, and others where you're working quietly to keep the embers glowing under the ash. In every stage, tending the fire is about presence, attention, and commitment, themes and attributes, consistency, showing up for your life even when the fire feels low, flexibility, adjusting the level of fuel and focus depending on the season you're in, resilience, trusting that the fire can be rekindled after a period of quiet, attunement, recognizing the signs when the fire needs more care or protection. Fires that fade, fires that last. I think about the hearths I've seen in old stone cottages, some roaring, some quiet, but all alive in their way. In winter, the fire is fed often, its flames leaping high against the cold. In summer, it may be little more than embers, a faint glow under the grate, but still there, ready to flare when the chill returns. Life's fireworks work the same way. There are times when energy, connection, and purpose flow easily, when it feels natural to welcome people in and share the warmth widely. And then there are quieter stretches where the work is more private, trimming away what burns too quickly, choosing the right wood, watching the sparks in the dark. The danger comes when we expect the fire to be at its peak all the time. That expectation leads to burnout, disappointment, and unnecessary self-criticism. The truth is, a healthy hearth and a healthy life honor the rhythm of the seasons. It's not a failure when the fire is low, it's simply part of the cycle that keeps it sustainable. Personal reflection. There have been seasons in my life where I felt like my fire had almost gone out. Not because I'd lost all hope or will, but because I was exhausted from constantly trying to keep the flames high. I thought people expected the version of me that was always on, engaged, available, giving warmth without pause. One winter, both literal and emotional, I realized I was burning myself to the point of ash. I had been saying yes to every request for my time and energy, letting my boundaries soften too much in fear of losing connection. It took a single quiet evening, sitting alone in my living room, watching the faint glow of a nearly burnt out candle, for me to feel the parallel. The candle didn't need to burn brightly in that moment. It just needed enough flame to keep going. Since then, I've been more intentional about my fire cycles. I've learned to recognize when I need to retreat into a quieter season, even if that means fewer social events or more time at home. Those pauses don't mean I've failed. They mean I'm preserving the energy to burn brightly again when the time is right. Ecological insight. This principle aligns closely with self-regulation theory, Baumeister and Vos, 2007, which recognizes that human energy, mental, emotional, and physical, is finite and must be replenished. Just as overloading a fire can smother it, overloading your life with demands can extinguish your drive and joy. It also connects with conservation of resources theory, Hopful, 1989, which suggests that individuals strive to retain, protect, and build resources, and that stress occurs when these resources are threatened or depleted. In this context, your fire is a metaphor for those vital resources: time, energy, emotional capacity, and personal values. By treating the fire as a living cycle rather than a static state, you give yourself permission to ebb and flow without judgment. This reframing reduces the shame of quieter periods and reframes them as necessary restoration phases, ensuring the long-term sustainability of your inner hearth. Insight prompts. How do you currently respond when your personal fire feels low? Which seasons in your life tend to require more fuel and which allow for rest? Theory in action. For 1 week, pay close attention to your energy levels at different times of day and in different environments. Keep a brief journal of what activities fuel you and what drains you. At the end of the week, identify one intentional adjustment you can make to match your life more closely to your current season, whether that means adding more fuel or allowing the fire to rest. Protecting the hearth from the storm. Even the strongest hearth is vulnerable to the elements. The storms in life, whether they come as crises or slow building pressures, can threaten to extinguish the fire you've worked so hard to build. Protecting the hearth isn't about sealing it off completely. It's about having the tools and strategies to shield it when the wind rises, so the warmth remains. Themes and attributes: preparation, anticipating challenges, and planning for how you'll respond. Resilience: withstanding external pressure without losing your core stability. Boundaries in action: putting protective measures into place when needed. Recovery: knowing how to rebuild quickly if the fire dims. Stormproofing the fire, I think of those old hearths in countryside cottages, the ones built deep into the wall with a heavy stone lintel above them. They were designed to withstand more than just the weather. They could take decades of use, even the occasional flood or drought. A well-tended fire in such a hearth doesn't just survive the storm, it sometimes burns brighter against it. Life's storms are varied. Some arrive without warning: a sudden loss, an unexpected betrayal, a health crisis. Others creep in quietly: burnout, financial strain, relationship tension. Each has the potential to sap the energy you've been building and, if unprotected, to blow out the flame entirely. But when the hearth is cared for, when you've gathered the right fuel, kept the tools close, and built it on a strong foundation, the fire stands a better chance. Sometimes the storm even teaches you something about your resilience, how you can still keep the space warm for yourself and, if possible, for others, even as the wind howls outside. Personal reflection: one of the most vivid storms. I've weathered came during a time when my personal life and professional obligations clashed in ways I couldn't control. I had a lot of plates spinning, commitments, deadlines, relationships, and the more I tried to keep them all going, the more the pressure built. It reached a point where every unexpected email or phone call felt like another gust of wind, threatening to snuff out what little energy I had left. My home, which was usually my safe space, started to feel like just another place where problems could reach me. I realized that I had been leaving the windows of my hearth wide open, letting in every draft without filtering what came through. The turning point came when I decided to actively stormproof my space. This wasn't just about saying no more often. It was about creating mental, emotional, and even physical boundaries. I stopped responding to messages outside set hours. I let some commitments go entirely. I made small but meaningful changes before I dealt with anything difficult, to remind myself that the fire was still mine to tend. The storm didn't vanish overnight, but I found I could endure it without burning out entirely. And when the skies finally cleared, the fire was still there, ready to grow again. Psychological insight, protecting your hearth during life's storms, can be understood through the lens of stress inoculation training, Meichenbaum, 1985, a psychological approach that involves anticipating stressors and developing coping strategies before they overwhelm you. Just like sealing the edges of a fireplace before bad weather, this process helps minimize the impact of external stress when it arrives. It also connects with the concept of psychological hardiness, Kobasa, 1979, which comprises three key attitudes: commitment, control, and challenge. Commitment keeps you engaged with life even in adversity. Control reminds you that while you can't stop the storm, you can control how you respond. And challenge reframes difficulties as opportunities to grow stronger. From my own experience, I've learned that the act of stormproofing your hearth is not about avoiding all discomfort. It's about creating a resilience buffer, habits, boundaries, and supportive rituals that allow you to keep the fire alive until calmer weather returns. Insight prompts: what current or potential storms in your life could threaten your sense of warmth and stability? How can you prepare your hearth, emotionally, mentally, and physically, to withstand them? Theory in action. Choose one protective measure you can put into place this week. This could be as practical as limiting exposure to stressful news, as emotional as setting a boundary with someone draining, or as physical as creating a corner of your home that feels safe and grounding. Keep track of how this measure affects your resilience during any unexpected challenges. Passing the fire on a hearth is more than just your warmth. It's a source that can light other fires. Passing the flame doesn't mean giving away your safety or burning yourself out. It's about sharing enough light and heat to help someone else find their footing without losing your own. It's a conscious act of generosity that respects both your needs and theirs. Themes and attributes: generosity with boundaries, giving without depleting yourself; mentorship, guiding others through your own learned experience; reciprocal growth, recognizing that shared warmth benefits both giver and receiver; legacy of care, creating ripples that extend beyond the immediate moment. The shared spark. I often think of the old tradition where neighbors whose own fires had gone out would come to borrow an ember from someone else's hearth. They'd carry it carefully in a covered pot, walking home slowly so the ember wouldn't die before they reached their fireplace. There's a deep trust in that exchange, both in the person offering the ember and the one carrying it. It's the understanding that the fire is precious, fragile, and worth the effort to preserve. And in the act of sharing, the giver doesn't lose their flame. Instead, the act reinforces the sense of community, of being connected through warmth and care. Personal reflection. I've had moments in my life where I've been both the one offering the ember and the one carrying it home. One that stands out is when I was going through a major low point, unsure of my next step. A friend, not someone I'd known for long, took the time to sit with me, listen without judgment, and share pieces of their own story that made me feel less alone. It wasn't a grand act, but it gave me just enough hope to keep going. Years later, I found myself in the opposite position. Someone I knew was struggling in ways that felt very familiar. I could see the signs, the isolation, the self-doubt, the weight of unspoken feelings. This time, I was able to offer the same presence that had once been offered to me. Not fixing, not forcing, just sitting in the warmth together until they could tend their fire again. These experiences have taught me that passing the fire on isn't about saving people. It's about offering a spark, a moment of connection, that reminds them they can create their heat and light. Ecological insight. This idea of passing the fire aligns with social support theory, Cobb 1976, which highlights how emotional, informational, and practical assistance from others can buffer against stress and improve resilience. Offering support is not a one-way transaction. Research shows that both giving and receiving help can increase feelings of belonging and purpose. It also ties into generativity, a concept from Erik Erikson's Stages of Psychosocial Development, which refers to the desire to contribute to the well-being of future generations. In adulthood, generativity often takes the form of mentorship, teaching, or simply modeling a way of living that inspires others. The key is intentionality, knowing how much you can give without overextending yourself. Healthy sharing strengthens both your fire and the fires of those around you. Insight prompts: who has passed their fire to you in a way that shaped your path? Where in your life could you share your warmth without compromising your stability? Ari in action. This week, choose one small way to pass the fire on. It could be checking in on someone you know who is struggling, sharing a resource that's helped you, or offering a listening ear without the pressure to solve anything. Notice how this act impacts not only the other person, but also your sense of connection and purpose. Where the fire meets the hearth, claiming the new as home isn't about perfection. It's about presence. A hearth doesn't need to be grand to hold meaning. What matters is that it's yours, tended with care, and alive with the energy you choose to feed it. Some people will be content to see the glow from a distance, respecting its warmth without stepping too close. Others will be invited in, not because they've earned it through tests or trials, but because they carry the kind of presence that adds to the fire rather than drains it. When you light your hearth, you're not just keeping yourself warm, you're creating a space where the life you've fought to build can breathe. That's sacred work. And the truth is, home is not a place you arrive at. It's a way you choose to live inside your skin every single day. You've been listening to the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. Until next time, stay human, stay awake, and keep your fire lit for the ones who come with open hands and kind hearts. Ames Miller. If you found value in today's episode, you may also be interested in my broader project, the Inversiverse, a series exploring the hidden architecture of perception, identity, control, and consciousness. Across 20 episodes, the Inversiverse dissects indoctrination, language, media manipulation, dark psychology, belief systems, and the evolution of self in the digital age. You can find all episodes of the Inversiverse on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Substack by searching this place called Earth. These ideas aren't shared to convince you, but to invite you to think, feel, and perceive more consciously in a world designed to keep you distracted. Overview of the Inversiverse: a journey through the mirrors of mind, culture, and control. Episodes 1 to 3 introduce foundational ideas around indoctrination, perception, and manipulation. Episode 4 explores how language, symbols, and cultural norms are used to shape thought. Episode 5 investigates control systems, media narratives, and the illusion of choice. Episodes 6 to 7 dives into collective belief structures and the psychology of mass behavior. Episode 8 focuses on marketing, control theory, game theory, and critical thinking. Episode 9 covers love relationships, human mating, gender dynamics, and red-blue pill ideologies. Episode 10 unpacks dark psychology, the occult, Satanism, and the dark triad personality types. Episode 11 The Simulated Self examines identity, ego, and the rise of post-human consciousness. Episode 12 The Spell of the Mind inquires into language, illusion, and physiology of thought. Episode 13 Conscious Seduction journeys through persuasion, propaganda, and the unseen forces of the mind. Episode 14 The Myth of Sanity sheds light on madness, genius, and the edge of perception. Episode 15 The Algorithmic Mind probes influence, identity, and invisible architects. Episode 16. The Noise of Knowing reveals overload, obsession, and the age of infinite information. Episode 17. Belief Machines delves further into language, desire, and the engine of reality. Episode 18. Submerged Signals examines how the unseen shapes the self. Episode 19. The Alchemy Within Traces, Food, Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Episode 20. Encoded Flesh scrutinizes and opens up to the forgotten language of the body, DNA, and biological consciousness.